Jade froze in front of the closet, staring at the rows of dresses. Her hand instinctively reached for the dark blue one, the strict, covered, safe option. But at the last second, she snatched out a fiery red, off-the-shoulder dress, the one Marcus always called lethal. Tonight, she was going to war, and she intended to win. Welcome to Betty's Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. Are you seriously going to wear that? Marcus stood in the bedroom doorway, fastening his watch. His voice held a mix of admiration and apprehension. What, don't you like it? Jade turned, raising an eyebrow. I do. It's Tiffany's birthday. It's supposed to be a casual get-together with friends. Friends? Jade mocked, pulling the dress on. Marcus, we both know that thing with your childhood pal is way more than just friendship. She's latched onto you like a tick. Jade, don't start, her husband said wearily. We've just known each other a long time. A long time. Jade spun around, her gray eyes flashing. You hadn't seen each other in 20 years. 20! And then 6 months ago she shows up, and now Tiffany is everywhere. Honey, let's grab coffee. Babe, help me pick out a new phone. Mark, my faucet is leaking. You're so handy with plumbing. I'm just helping a person who's going through a divorce. The divorce was 2 years ago. Jade's voice rose. 2 years! Marcus, she's long since recovered, and now she's methodically wrapping her sticky tentacles around my husband. Marcus sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose, his usual gesture when he wanted to avoid an argument. Jade, I love you. You're my wife, the mother of my children. What does Tiffany have to do with anything? She has everything to do with it. When she's around, you look at her like she's the last sip of water in the desert. A heavy silence fell between them. Marcus opened his mouth but closed it without saying a word. That silence, Jade said, says more than any excuse could. She turned back to the mirror and started her makeup. Her hands trembled slightly, from anger, from hurt, from fear. 14 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage, a joint business, mutual friends, intertwined lives. And now, in walks Tiffany, with her big blue eyes, her helplessness, her I'm so lonely after the divorce routine. Jade vividly remembered their first meeting 3 months ago. Marcus had invited Tiffany over for dinner. Meet her, you two will love talking to each other, he'd said. Jade had expected to see a frumpy housewife or a stressed-out career woman. Instead, the doorbell brought a tall blonde with a model's figure, dressed in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. Oh, Jadeness! Tiffany beamed and rushed to hug her like an old friend. I'm so happy to finally meet you. Mark has told me so much about you. Mark. From the very first minute, she called him Mark, though in all their years of marriage, Jade had never heard anyone call him that. Even his mother called him Marcus. The entire dinner, Tiffany looked at Marcus with wet eyes, reminiscing about their childhood. Remember when we snuck into that abandoned house, and how you protected me from the bullies in 7th grade? And remember when we... And Marcus remembered, smiling that special, soft, warm smile. Jade sat next to them, like an extra in someone else's play. After that dinner, Tiffany became a constant presence in their life. She popped up everywhere, running into Marcus at the local grocery store, turning up at the same cafe where he and Jade loved to get brunch on weekends, calling at the most inconvenient times. And Marcus? Marcus either didn't notice or pretended not to notice. Mom, why are you so pretty? 7-year-old Skylar poked her sleepy head into the bedroom. Sweetheart, you should be asleep. Jade knelt beside her daughter. Grandma is here to stay with you. Are you going to Aunt Tiff's party? Jade winced. Aunt Tiff? Another one of that woman's conquests, her children. Tiffany brought them gifts, remembered their birthdays, and took an interest in their activities. It was the perfect tactic. Yes, sweetie, it's her birthday. Why does she always come alone, though? Doesn't she have any kids of her own? From the hallway, Marcus's voice called out, "Skylar, go to Grandma, or your ice cream will melt." The girl squealed happily and ran off. Jade slowly stood up, smoothing her dress. A beautiful woman with tired eyes stared back at her from the mirror. "Jade." Marcus came up behind her, putting his hands on her shoulders. "Let's not ruin the evening. Tiffany is just an old acquaintance, nothing more." "Do you even believe that yourself?" Jade asked, looking at his reflection. "I believe in us." He turned her to face him. "In you and me, in our family." Jade wanted to believe those words. She wanted to feel conviction in his touch. But something inside her was tightening into a knot. She saw how he looked at Tiffany. She saw that look, not lustful, not hungry, but nostalgic, dreamy, as if Tiffany were a door to the past, to when he was young, free, and full of hope. "It's time to go," Jade said, stepping out of his embrace. In the living room, they were met by Marcus's mother, Miss Vivian Reed. The thin, severe woman with cool blue eyes gave Jade an appraising look. "Red dress," she drawled. "A bold choice. Is tonight special?" "It is." Jade gave a strained smile. "It's that Tiffany's birthday." Miss Vivian pressed her lips together. "Marcus, I don't understand why you bother with that woman. You have a family." "Mom, please." Marcus grabbed the car keys. "It's just friendship." "Friendship?" Miss Vivian scoffed. "I've lived 65 years, and I know what friendship looks like, and I know what hunting looks like, too." Jade felt an unexpected surge of gratitude toward her mother-in-law. They usually didn't get along, but at least someone was on her side now. In the car, Marcus turned on the radio, filling the silence with music. Jade looked out the window at the streets gliding by. The evening was warm, a late May promise of summer. People walked in pairs, laughing, embracing. Jade remembered when she and Marcus were like that, in love, happy, certain of their future. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked. "When everything changed," Jade answered honestly. He didn't ask what she meant. That meant he understood. The restaurant was downtown, on the rooftop of a historic loft building. Panoramic windows offered a view of the evening city. Lights began to flicker on one by one. Marcus offered Jade his hand, helping her out of the car, and she noticed him straighten his tie, checking his reflection in the glass door. He was nervous to meet Tiffany. The elevator took them up to the top floor, and with every passing moment, Jade felt the tension building. She clutched her purse, small, elegant, almost useless. Inside were her phone, lipstick, and the fierce resolve not to let this woman destroy her marriage. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped into the restaurant. The room was about 1/3 full, around 30 guests. Soft music, muted lighting, and there, in the center, shining like a star, stood Tiffany. She was in a white dress, of course, a symbol of innocence and purity. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun, with blonde strands escaping. Minimal makeup created an effect of natural beauty. When she saw Marcus, her face lit up with such joy that Jade felt nauseous. "Mark!" Tiffany rushed toward them, and Jade noted them, but she only hugged Marcus. Long, too long. "I'm so glad you came." "Happy birthday, Tiffany." Marcus handed her a bouquet of peonies. "Oh my God, you remembered that they're my favorite flowers?" She pressed the bouquet to her chest, her blue eyes welling up. "Thank you, you've always been so thoughtful." Peonies are her favorite flowers, Jade noted mentally. She hadn't known that, but Marcus hadn't told her. He just bought them. "Jadeness." Tiffany finally deigned to look at her. "What a dress! You look loud." In that word, loud, was everything. Vulgar, inappropriate, trying too hard to get attention. Jade offered a strained smile. "Thank you. I decided not to blend in with the decor." They were led to the tables. Tiffany sat Marcus right next to her. Jade ended up one person over, next to one of the birthday girl's colleagues. Jade watched them all evening. She watched Tiffany lean in toward Marcus, whispering something in his ear. She watched her laugh at his jokes, touch his hand, and brush a non-existent piece of lint off his blazer. And Marcus? Marcus didn't stop her. He smiled, responded, and dove into their shared memories. With every minute, Jade felt a cold fury swell within her. Waiters passed appetizers, glasses were filled with champagne, and gradually the evening picked up pace. Jade mechanically smiled at her tablemate, a heavy-set woman in her 50s who was breathlessly recounting her problems with her boss. But the words flew past, not registering in her consciousness. All of Jade's focus was glued to the two figures at the opposite end of the table. Her husband and the woman who was leaning so close to him now that her hair almost brushed his cheek. Tiffany laughed, a clear, genuine laugh, throwing her head back, exposing her long white neck, and Marcus looked at her with an expression Jade hadn't seen on his face in years. It was the look of a man who had forgotten his late 30s, the mortgage, the parent-teacher conferences, the utility bills, and the fact that he needed to take Noah to the orthodontist in the morning. He looked the way a 20-year-old looks, openly, hungrily, as if trying to soak up every second. And I told her, "This is the 7th report this month. How much more do you need?" Her tablemate continued her monologue, unaware that Jade wasn't listening. "Excuse me." Jade abruptly stood up, feeling how the dress hugged her figure, how her heels gave her a few extra inches of height. "I need to use the restroom." She walked slowly across the room, keeping her back straight, and noticed out of the corner of her eye that Marcus's gaze followed her. Good. Let him watch. Let him remember he has a wife who can still make men turn their heads. In the restroom, Jade leaned against the sink, looking at her reflection in the mirror. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes glittered with anger or tears. She couldn't tell which. She turned on the cold water, carefully wetting her wrists, trying not to ruin her makeup. She needed to pull herself together. She couldn't make a scene. She couldn't show weakness, especially not here, surrounded by strangers in front of Tiffany, who was just waiting for Jade to crack. The door behind her opened, and the birthday girl's reflection appeared in the mirror. Of course, like she could sense it. "Jadeness," Tiffany approached, adjusting the strands of hair that had escaped her bun. "Is everything okay? You left so suddenly." "Everything's fine." Jade turned, forcing a smile. "Just a little stuffy in the room." Yes, a lot of people showed up. Tiffany took a lipstick out of her small clutch and started touching up her lips. "I'm so happy Mark could come. He's been, well, you understand, such a rock for me right now." Jade felt something clench inside her. "A rock?" she asked, trying to keep her tone level. "Well, yes." Tiffany turned, and her blue eyes held feigned innocence. "After the divorce, I was so lost. I even thought, oh, it doesn't matter. But then I found Mark, and he's so thoughtful, so caring. He helped me move, helped with the repairs. He even went with me to pick out furniture. Can you imagine? We spent 3 hours at the showroom choosing a sofa." 3 hours. Marcus had said he was stuck late at work. Jade remembered that day. It was early March. She'd made dinner, waiting for her husband until 7 o'clock, but he hadn't returned until 10, tired and distracted, mumbling something about an urgent project before heading straight to the shower. "I didn't know my husband was such a furniture specialist." Jade heard her voice harden, growing sharper. "Oh, he's great at everything." Tiffany turned back to the mirror, adjusting her dress. "And you know, I think he enjoys helping, feeling needed, important. That probably gets lost in a marriage over time, doesn't it? All those daily hassles, kids, work, bills, you stop noticing each other." Jade took a step forward, and Tiffany involuntarily backed up. "Listen to me carefully." Jade spoke softly, but every word was a blow. "I see exactly what you're doing. All those chance meetings, the calls, the requests for help, your helplessness, your fragility, your big sad eyes. You're hunting my husband." Tiffany feigned surprise, but a smile trembled at the corners of her mouth. "Jade, are you serious? We're just childhood friends, nothing more." "Childhood friends who hadn't seen each other in 20 years, Jade cut in. "If you were looking for friendship, you'd be spending time with his wife too. You'd invite both of us, you'd ask about our family. But you only want Marcus. Alone. Without me." Tiffany paused, and when she spoke again, there was no trace of feigned softness in her voice. "Maybe it's not about me? Maybe it's that Mark is bored, that he misses the lightness, the joy he had in his youth. You turned him into a workhorse, house, kids, bills, obligations, and I remind him of a time when he was free, happy." "He is happy," Jade's voice wavered. "He has a family, children he loves." "He loves them," Tiffany agreed. "But that doesn't make him happy. It makes him responsible. Those are two different things, Jade." They stood facing each other, two women fighting for one man, and in that small restroom, amid the sparkling mirrors and marble sinks, the fate of a marriage was being decided. "Marcus won't leave me," Jade said, though she wasn't sure of the words herself. "We have 2 children, 14 years together. Do you know what keeps people in a marriage?" Tiffany tilted her head, observing Jade with the curiosity of an entomologist studying a butterfly. "Habit, fear of change, not wanting to hurt the kids. But not love. Love is what you had in the beginning, and then it dissolves into chores and arguments over who forgot to turn off the light or buy milk. And what are you offering?" Jade crossed her arms over her chest. "New love? Fresh passion? Do you think it will be any different with you in a year?" "I don't know," Tiffany admitted honestly, "but at least we'll have this year. And what do you have? Memories of when things used to be good." The restroom door opened, letting in the hum of voices and music. A young woman in her 20s, cheerful and slightly drunk, came in, starting to sing softly while checking herself out in the mirror. Tiffany smiled softly at Jade, as if they had just been discussing the weather and not the future of a marriage. "Let's go. The guests are waiting," she said, and headed for the exit. Jade remained standing, feeling her heart pound. Her hands were shaking, and she squeezed them into fists, trying to regain control. She couldn't let Tiffany's words show how deeply they affected her. She couldn't give her that victory. When Jade returned to the room, Marcus was sitting in the same spot, but now he was talking to a middle-aged man, apparently one of Tiffany's colleagues. Seeing his wife, he stood up and walked over. "Everything okay? You were gone a long time." "I'm fine." Jade took a glass of champagne from the table and took a large gulp. The wine was cold, the bubbles tickled her tongue. "Jade," Marcus lowered his voice, "you're angry. I can tell." "Really?" She looked at him. "And what is it you see, Marcus?" "I see you've been tense all evening. I see you're uncomfortable here." "I'm uncomfortable watching my rival circle my husband," Jade snapped, quietly but clearly. "I'm uncomfortable watching how you look at her." "I'm looking at an old friend," Marcus began, but Jade interrupted. "No, you're looking at her the way you once looked at me, like an opportunity, like something that could change your life." Marcus opened his mouth to object, but the words caught in his throat, because it was the truth, and they both knew it. "Everyone, please take your seats." Tiffany's voice cut through the tension between them. "The cake is coming out now." The guests murmured, laughed, and made their way back to their places. Jade and Marcus remained standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by other people's merriment. And for the first time in 14 years of marriage, a chasm had opened between them, one they were afraid to bridge. "Let's go," Jade said, and was the first to walk toward the table. The cake was 3 tiers, decorated with buttercream roses. When the waiters brought it in to the guests' applause, Tiffany lit the candles, 38 candles, one for each year of her life. "Make a wish!" someone shouted from the crowd. Tiffany closed her eyes, and Jade saw her gaze flick toward Marcus beforehand. She saw her smile. That special, intimate smile meant only for one person. And Jade realized that disaster was coming. The candles were blown out to unified applause. The cake was cut into perfect triangular slices, and waiters distributed the dessert. Jade stared at her portion, tender sponge cake with strawberry cream, adorned with a sugar rose, and felt her stomach clench with nausea. She couldn't eat. She couldn't pretend everything was normal while this woman sat next to her husband and made plans for his future. "Friends." Tiffany stood, holding a champagne glass, and the room gradually fell silent. "Thank you for coming to share this evening with me. You are all so important to me." She scanned the guests, lingering on Marcus a moment longer than the others. "This year has been difficult," Tiffany continued, dramatic notes entering her voice. "I've reevaluated a lot of things. I've learned a lot about myself, about what I want, and about who I truly care for." Jade gripped the edge of the tablecloth under the table, holding so tightly she could feel the fabric crumple in her palm. "Sometimes, life brings people back to us." Tiffany's voice grew softer, more intimate, as if she were speaking not to the room, but to one specific person. "People we lost many years ago, and that's not a coincidence. It's a sign." Marcus sat motionless, looking at Tiffany, and Jade couldn't read his expression. It was somewhere between embarrassment and fascination, a dangerous mix that promised nothing good. "So, let's drink to not being afraid to follow our desires." Tiffany raised her glass. "To being honest with ourselves, and to the people who make our lives brighter." The guests raised their glasses, shouting, "Cheers!" and laughing. Someone made a joke about the lack of a groom. Someone else started demanding that the birthday girl kiss the most handsome man in the room. Jade saw several eyes turn toward Marcus, saw the smiles widen, and felt the expectation hanging in the air. "Come on, Tiffany, don't be shy," shouted the heavyset woman who had been sitting next to Jade. "Pick him!" Tiffany laughed, covering her mouth with her hand, a gesture that was meant to look bashful. But Jade saw the calculation in those blue eyes. She saw Tiffany slowly circle the table, heading straight for their seats, as all the guests waited in anticipation. Jade stood up suddenly, so abruptly that the chair behind her rocked. All eyes turned to her. "How about you give me your husband as a gift?" Tiffany offered a sly smile. "He's quite the present, by the way." "So, like in the fairy tales, I'll kiss him, and he'll immediately be uncharmed and realize who the most important woman in his life is." "Excuse me, Tiffany," Jade said loudly, distinctly, so the whole room could hear. "But the most handsome man here is my husband, and I'm the only one who will be kissing him." A tense silence fell. Tiffany stopped halfway, her smile frozen on her face. Marcus looked at Jade with such surprise, as if he were seeing her for the first time. Then, something else flickered in his eyes. Respect? Interest? Jade couldn't tell for sure. "Of course," Tiffany drew out the word after a pause. "I wasn't serious. It was just a game." "A game?" Jade repeated, her voice a challenge. "Yes, maybe to you, all of this is a game." The atmosphere in the room grew awkward. A few guests exchanged glances. Someone cleared their throat. Tiffany returned to her seat, but her expression had changed. The mask of the sweet, vulnerable woman began to crack, and something else, cold and calculated, peeked through. Jade sat back down, feeling the adrenaline rush through her veins. She had crossed a line, and she knew it. She had made a scene at someone else's party, showing everyone her irritation, her jealousy. But to remain silent any longer had been impossible. A moment more, and she would have exploded. "Jade," Marcus leaned in, speaking quietly. "Why did you do that? Why?" She turned to him, her eyes blazing with anger. "Are you seriously asking me that? Did you see what she was doing all evening?" "She was just having fun at her birthday party," Marcus continued in the same low tone, trying not to attract attention. "And you made a scene." "I made a scene." Jade felt something break inside her. "Marcus, she openly told everyone she wants to take back what she lost years ago. She was talking about you, to me, in front of all these people." "You're exaggerating." But there was no confidence in Marcus's voice. "No." Jade shook her head. "I finally see the situation for what it is, and you are deliberately closing your eyes to it." Waiters brought out the main courses: warm salad with veal, baked fish, pasta with seafood. The guests livened up, and conversations resumed. But now eyes occasionally darted toward Jade and Marcus, and then to Tiffany, who was demonstratively chatting happily with her colleagues, acting as if nothing had happened. Jade picked up her fork and tried to eat a piece of fish, but the food caught in her throat. She put the utensil down and took a sip of water. Next to her, Marcus wasn't eating either. He sat staring at his plate, his mind clearly far away. "You're mad at me," Jade stated. "I'm not mad." He raised his eyes. "I just don't understand why you're behaving this way. Tiffany is my old friend. We hadn't seen each other in years. Don't I have the right to socialize with people from my past?" "You do," Jade agreed. "But she doesn't want to be your friend, Marcus. She wants more. And if you don't see that, you're either blind or pretending to be." Marcus remained silent, and Jade saw something change in his face. Tension appeared in his jaw. His gaze hardened. "Maybe it's not about Tiffany," he said slowly. "Maybe it's about us. About the fact that something hasn't been right between us for a long time." Those words struck harder than Jade expected, because they contained a measure of truth she didn't want to acknowledge. Yes, weariness had long settled between them. Yes, they had become functional. Parents, partners in domestic life, but not lovers. When was the last time they had simply laughed together? When was the last time they had made love, not out of routine, but out of desire? "And you think Tiffany will fix that?" Jade asked quietly. "I didn't say I want to fix anything with her," Marcus retorted. "But with her, it's easy, you know. We talk, we laugh, and I don't feel the burden of responsibility. She doesn't criticize me for working late. She doesn't ask why I forgot to buy milk. With her, I can just be myself." "And you can't with me?" Jade's voice trembled. Marcus didn't answer, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. The evening dragged on like a slow healing wound, and every minute felt like an eternity. Jade sat at the table, smiling when necessary, nodding in response to her table-mates' remarks, but all her attention was fixed on her husband. Marcus was drinking more than usual, already his third glass of wine, though he rarely allowed himself more than two. His cheeks were slightly flushed, his movements a bit more abrupt, and Jade understood that he was also at his limit. The music played louder, the guests relaxed, and a few couples got up to dance. Tiffany fluttered between the tables, accepting congratulations, laughing, and hugging friends, but her gaze constantly returned to Marcus, like a compass needle finding north. "Mark," Tiffany came up to their table, holding a bottle of wine. "You're barely drinking. Let me pour you another." She leaned over him, and the neckline of her white dress was directly at his eye level. Jade saw Marcus flinch, looking away, but the redness on his neck betrayed his embarrassment. "I'm driving," he mumbled. "Nonsense," Tiffany smiled, pouring the wine anyway. "One glass won't hurt, or stay the night. I have a big apartment. There's plenty of room." "Thank you, but we have children," Jade interjected coolly. "We need to go home." "Children?" Tiffany straightened up, a slight mocking tone in her voice. "Of course, children. You are parents, always parents first." She said it as if parents were synonymous with boring or unfree. Jade felt anger boiling inside her but held back. Not here, not now. She wouldn't give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her lose control. "Yes," Jade said firmly, "we are parents, and we are proud of it." Tiffany wanted to say something, but a group of guests approached, demanding a photo, and after throwing one last glance at Marcus, she moved toward the makeshift photo booth by the window. "Jade," Marcus turned to his wife, "listen, maybe we really should talk, not here, at home, about us." "About the fact that you're falling in love with another woman?" Jade asked point blank. Marcus froze, his glass halfway to his lips. "I'm not falling in love," he said, but the words sounded uncertain. "It's just, Tiffany reminds me of a time when everything was simpler, when we had a whole life full of possibilities ahead of us." "And now what?" Jade leaned closer, her voice growing harsher. "Now there are only obligations, A boring marriage? Kids who prevent you from being free? You're twisting my words. No. Jade shook her head. I'm hearing what you're actually saying. You're tired of our life, of me, and you're looking for a way out. Marcus put the glass down and ran a hand over his face. Such exhaustion was visible in the gesture that Jade was suddenly genuinely afraid. She was afraid not of anger or a scandal, but of this quiet despair, which meant that he had already made up his mind. I'm not looking for a way out, Marcus finally said. I just feel like I'm suffocating. Work, home, work, home. The same thing day after day, and the only bright moments are when I see Tiffany, when we talk about books, about music, about what we liked when we were young. I remember who I used to be, who I wanted to be. And who did you want to be? Jade asked, feeling everything inside her turn cold. Not a husband? Not a father? That's not what I mean. Marcus rubbed his temples. God, Jade, why do you turn everything into a drama? Because it is a drama. Jade's voice broke. A few heads turned in their direction. She lowered her voice, leaning toward her husband. You're sitting here, drinking wine, looking at another woman the way you haven't looked at me in ages, and you tell me you're suffocating in our marriage. What is that if not a drama? Marcus remained silent, looking at the table. Jade saw his jaw tighten, his fingers clench around the stem of the glass. She knew this sign. He was angry, but restraining himself. He always did that when he didn't want to argue in public. I think I need some air, he said, standing up. Of course. Jade leaned back in her chair. Run. That's what you do best. Marcus froze, looked at her with a long glance that held pain, and headed for the exit. Jade watched him go, feeling her heart pound somewhere in her throat. And then she saw Tiffany, having finished her photo shoot, also move toward the exit, unnoticeable to the other guests. No, not this. Jade stood up, but at that moment, the heavy-set table-mate stopped her. Honey, is everything all right? Did you and your husband have a fight? Everything is wonderful. Jade gave a strained smile. Just a little tired. She walked around the woman and headed for the exit. Her heart was beating wildly, her palms were sweating. What were they doing out there? What were they talking about? Jade knew that eavesdropping was low, undignified, but she couldn't stop. She needed to know the truth, no matter how bitter. The exit from the room led to a small corridor with panoramic windows. Beyond the glass lay the night city, a scatter of lights, silhouettes of buildings, the distant glow of neon signs. Marcus and Tiffany were standing by the window. She was saying something, head bowed, and he was listening, looking off into the distance. Then, Tiffany stepped closer, placed a hand on his shoulder, and Jade saw Marcus freeze, not pulling away. Everything inside her plummeted. Jade stood a few feet away, hidden in the dim light of the corridor, and watched her marriage crumble, watched this woman touch her husband, and watched him allow it. They stood too close to each other, in that intimate proximity allowed only between lovers, or those about to become one. Mark, Tiffany's voice was soft, enveloping. I see how much pain you're in. You know, you don't have to tolerate what makes you unhappy. Jade doesn't make me unhappy, Marcus objected, but there was no conviction in his voice. Maybe not her, Tiffany agreed, but your marriage does. The routine, the obligations. You see it yourself. There hasn't been a spark between you two for a long time. Jade clenched her fists. She wanted to walk out, to scream, to tear the scene apart, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. Jade spun around and quickly returned to the room. She wouldn't stand in the shadows and watch her life unravel. She wouldn't give Tiffany that power. She walked past the dancing guests, grabbed her purse from the table, and headed for the coat check. Her hands trembled as she put on her light jacket, but she forced herself to move slowly, with dignity. Jadeness, are you leaving already? Tiffany appeared like a jack-in-the-box. Her painted lips twisted into a look of feigned sympathy. So early? No, late, Jade corrected, buttoning her coat. It's already late enough for many things. Marcus appeared behind her, slightly disheveled, with reddened eyes. "Jade, where are you going? I told you I'm driving." "Then stay." Jade turned to him, and her gaze held so much coldness that he flinched. Tiffany offered a place to sleep. Take advantage of her hospitality. "What?" Marcus frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about being tired of being the third person in my own marriage." Jade took out her phone, calling a rideshare. "Tired of pretending I don't see the way you look at her, how she touches your shoulder, and you don't pull away." "Jade, God, no!" Marcus grabbed her arm. "We were just talking." "Talking," Jade repeated, pulling her arm free. "You know, Marcus, there are different kinds of infidelity. Not just physical, there's emotional infidelity. When you share with another woman what you should be sharing with your wife, when you seek understanding, warmth, and support from her, you've already cheated on me. You just haven't decided to sleep with her yet." Tiffany stood off to the side, watching the scene with poorly concealed satisfaction. A slight smile played on her lips. She was winning, and she knew it. "Jadeness, no need for drama," she intervened softly. "We're all adults. Sometimes feelings just happen." "Feelings don't just happen." Jade turned to her, fire blazing in her eyes. "They are grown. You methodically, step by step, destroyed my marriage. The calls, the meetings, the helplessness you hid behind. And he fell for it because men love to feel like heroes." "And what did you offer him?" Tiffany tilted her head, and her tone hardened. "Criticism about forgotten milk? Complaints about being late? You turned him into a function, a provider, a father, a husband, but you forgot that he's also just a man who needs attention." Jade felt something flip inside her, because there was a truth in Tiffany's words, bitter and unpleasant. When was the last time she'd asked about something other than the mortgage and parent-teacher conferences? When was the last time she'd asked not about work, but about his dreams? "Jade, let's go home." Marcus took her by the elbow. "We'll talk calmly." "No," she pulled away. "I'm going alone. You need to decide, Marcus. Who are you with? Your family or this memory of your youth?" Her phone vibrated in her hand. The rideshare was 2 minutes away. Jade walked out of the restaurant without looking back. The late May air was warm, smelling of blooming dogwood and distant rain. The city lived its nightlife. Somewhere, drunk parties laughed, cars drove past, traffic lights blinked. And Jade stood on the sidewalk, feeling something inside her collapse. A white car with a worn interior and a middle-aged driver who sleepily nodded a greeting pulled up quickly. Jade gave the address and leaned back in the seat, closing her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw the image. Tiffany and Marcus by the window, too close to each other. "Rough night?" the driver asked, looking in the rearview mirror. "You could say that." Jade opened her eyes, watching the lights flicker past the window. "A woman in a red dress, alone at night. That's either a really good ending to the evening or a really bad one," the driver noted philosophically. "The second one." Jade tried to smile, but it came out crooked. They drove through downtown, past illuminated storefronts, past bars where music was spilling out, past 24-hour cafes where night owls sat with their nighttime problems. Jade looked at this city, where she had lived 14 years of her married life, and it felt as though she was seeing it for the first time, or maybe saying goodbye to it. She couldn't tell which. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus." Jade looked at the glowing name and declined the call. A minute later, a text. "Jade, please, let's talk. I'm coming to get you." "Don't bother," she texted back. "I need time to think." The house greeted her with darkness. Only the nightlight in the hall glowed faintly. Jade took off her shoes, which had rubbed her feet raw during this endless evening, and walked barefoot to the kitchen. In the living room, Ms. Vivian was asleep on the sofa, covered with a throw blanket. An unfinished cup of tea sat on the coffee table. Jade didn't wake her. Explaining anything now was beyond her strength. In the kitchen, she poured herself filtered water and sat down at the table. The best years of her life had been spent in this apartment. Her 3-year-old son, Noah, had sat in this chair smearing chocolate on his face. Tiny Skylar had stood by this window demanding to be shown the moon. Around this very table, she and Marcus had planned renovations, argued about the color of the paint, and laughed at stupid jokes. When did it all change? Jade tried to recall the exact moment, but it slipped away. The changes had happened slowly, like rust eating away at metal from the inside. First, he started working late. Then he talked less at dinner. Then he stopped asking about her day, her thoughts, her feelings. They had turned into roommates, companions in raising children, but they had stopped being lovers, friends, partners. And then Tiffany appeared, with her big eyes, her helplessness, her memories of their shared past. Jade could blame her, but honesty demanded she admit that if there hadn't been cracks in their marriage, Tiffany wouldn't have been able to slip inside. The front door slammed. Marcus. Jade heard him speaking to his mother in a low voice, heard Miss Vivian ask something in surprise, and heard his short, irritated reply. Then footsteps headed toward the kitchen. Marcus stood in the doorway, ruffled, tired, the collar of his shirt unbuttoned. They looked at each other across the kitchen, and in that gaze was everything. The years spent together, the two children, the shared life, and the suddenly discovered chasm between them. Mom asked what happened, Marcus said. I told her we argued. We didn't argue. Jade slowly set the glass on the table. People argue over small things. We are standing on the edge. The edge of what? Divorce, Jade simply said. And the word hung between them, heavy and final. Marcus turned pale, grabbing the doorframe. Divorce? He repeated, as if he hadn't understood. Jade, are you serious? What do you think all this will end in? She stood up, pacing the kitchen, feeling the accumulated tension, demanding release. You're in love with another woman. Maybe you don't admit it to yourself yet, but I see it. I'm not blind, Marcus. I'm not in love. He stepped into the kitchen, closing the door behind him so as not to wake his mother. God, Jade, there is nothing between Tiffany and me. Not yet, Jade clarified, but you want there to be. I saw the way you looked at her, how you came alive next to her, as if you were young and free again. Marcus sank into a chair, running his hands over his face. Maybe you're right, he said quietly. Maybe I am looking for something. I don't know what exactly. The feeling that life isn't over, that there's still something ahead besides work and bills. This honesty was worse than any lie. Jade felt something break inside her. Then go to her, she said, surprised at how calm her voice sounded. If you're so miserable with me, if I'm just an obligation, go. Free yourself. Jade, no. The truth, she approached him, sitting down across the table. I won't hold you against your will. I won't manipulate you with the children, with tears, with our shared past. If you want to leave, go. Marcus looked at her, and there was such confusion in his eyes that Jade almost pitied him. Almost. I don't want to leave, he finally said. I'm just tired of everything. And with Tiffany, I can breathe easier because she's your vacation from reality. Jade leaned back in her chair. With her, you're not a dad, not a husband, not the one who has to remember to pay the cable bill. You're just Mark, the fun kid who once snuck into abandoned houses. But that's an illusion, Marcus. If you were together, reality would return. Bills, chores, problems, and it would turn out the magic wasn't in her, but in the absence of responsibility. Silence hung heavy. From the living room came the sound of Miss Vivian snoring. From the children's room, Skylar's quiet breathing. The ordinary sounds of their home, their life. I don't know what to do, Marcus admitted. Then I'll tell you. Jade stood up, walking to the window. Beyond the glass, the pre-dawn sky was darkening. Tomorrow morning, you pack a small bag and leave for a few days, to your mother's, to a friend's, wherever you want. You think about what you really want, and I'll think about whether I'm ready to live with a man who looks at me like an anchor. Jade, the kids. We'll tell the kids Dad's on a business trip, she cut in. We won't traumatize them before we need to. But if you decide you want Tiffany, we'll have to tell them the truth. Marcus stood up, wanting to approach and hug her, but Jade stepped away. "Don't," she said. "Right now, your touch only makes the pain worse." He left the kitchen, and a minute later, Jade heard the bedroom door close. She remained standing by the window, looking at the dark city, and thought about how life knows how to spring surprises. Yesterday morning, she was sure of her marriage. Tonight, she stood on the brink of divorce. Morning came too quickly. Jade hadn't slept. She lay on the sofa in the living room, covered with the same throw blanket Ms. Vivian had used, and listened as the house woke up. Ms. Vivian was the first one up, heading to the kitchen to put on the kettle. Jade closed her eyes, pretending to be asleep. Explaining anything now was unbearable. Then the children woke. Noah came out sleepy, in pajama bottoms and an old t-shirt, scratching his stomach. Skylar ran out right behind him, already wide awake, with disheveled pigtails. "Mom!" She saw Jade on the sofa. "Why are you here?" "We got back late. I didn't want to wake Dad." Jade sat up, adjusting her hair. "Good morning, sunshine." Skylar climbed onto her lap, smelling of sleep and kids' shampoo. Noah silently plopped into the armchair, burying his face in his phone. 11-year-old boys don't hug their moms in the morning anymore. Jade knew that, but she still felt a little pang of loss every time. "How was the party?" Ms. Vivian asked, appearing from the kitchen with a cup of coffee. "It was fine," Jade lied. "It was fun." Ms. Vivian looked at her with a long, assessing gaze. She didn't believe it, but she didn't press for details in front of the children. Marcus came out of the bedroom last. He was dressed and groomed, but looked like he hadn't slept all night. Dark circles lined his eyes. His movements were slow and tired. "Good morning," he said to the kids, ruffling Noah's hair and kissing the top of Skylar's head. He didn't even look at Jade. "Dad, can we go to the park today?" Skylar asked. "You promised we could rollerblade." "Not today, Princess." Marcus poured himself a cup of coffee. "Dad has things to do." "Always things to do," Noah mumbled, not looking up from his phone. "You always have things to do." Jade caught Ms. Vivian's eye and knew. The woman sensed everything. Ms. Vivian was perceptive. Over the years, she had learned to read people like an open book. After breakfast, when the children had scattered to their rooms, Marcus packed a small bag. Jade stood in the hallway, her arms crossed over her chest, silently watching. "I'm going to rent a place for a few days," he said, zipping up the bag. "I need to think." "Fine," she nodded. "Jade, He stumbled, searching for words. "I didn't want things to turn out this way." "I know." She smiled bitterly. "No one ever wants it to, but it does." He left, and Jade closed the door behind him. She leaned her back against it, closed her eyes. It had begun. The life she had known for 14 years had begun to crumble. "Jadeness?" Ms. Vivian approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "What happened?" And Jade couldn't hold it in. She burst into tears, allowing herself a moment of weakness for the first time since that nightmarish evening and night. Ms. Vivian hugged her, and they stood there in the entryway, two women trying to glue back together what one man had broken. An hour later, Jade was sitting in a cafe across from her friend Chloe. They needed to talk, and that was impossible at home, under the scrutiny of Ms. Vivian and the children's questions. Chloe listened, sipping her cappuccino, her face growing grimmer. "That snake," she summarized when Jade finished. "A classic homewrecker. I've seen her type before." "It's not just her." Jade stirred sugar into her tea, though she usually drank it plain. "It's Marcus and me. We lost each other somewhere between parent-teacher conferences and grocery runs." "Then find each other again." Chloe leaned across the table. 14 years of marriage isn't nothing. That's a huge chunk of life. Are you just going to throw it all away?" "I'm not throwing it away," Jade countered. "He's the one doubting, not me." Chloe leaned back in her chair, looking at her friend with a searching gaze. They had been friends since college, having shared first loves, disappointments, Jade's wedding, and Chloe's own, which ended in divorce 3 years ago. If anyone could understand what was happening, it was Chloe. "Listen," she said, pouring herself water from the carafe. Maybe you need to shake things up too. For the past few years, you've only been a mom and a wife. Where is Jade? The girl who danced all night, read poetry on the dorm roof, dreamed of opening her own design studio? Jade winced. She grew up, became an adult, took on responsibility. Or she just died somewhere along the way, Chloe said sharply. Jade, when was the last time you did something for yourself? Not for the kids, not for your husband, not for the family, just for you? Jade opened her mouth to answer, but realized she couldn't. She had indeed been living by a schedule. Take the kids to school, pick them up from activities, make dinner, check homework, do laundry, iron, go to the grocery store. In between, she worked remotely as a designer for a small agency, taking on logos and brochures. Not the studio she dreamed of, but something. I don't remember, she admitted quietly. See? Chloe nodded triumphantly. And then you wonder why your husband looks at another woman. Jade, you became invisible to him, and to yourself. You became a function. The words hit their mark, and every hit was painful. Jade wanted to object, to defend herself, but she couldn't, because Chloe was right. Somewhere between the first maternity leave and the second, between kids' parties and endless cooking, she had lost herself. She had stopped wearing bright lipstick, stopped wearing heels just because, and stopped laughing at silly things. What should I do now? Jade asked, feeling tears well up. Run to the gym, get a new hairstyle, and wait for him to come back? No, Chloe shook her head. Do it for yourself. Remember who you are without the role of wife and mother. As for Marcus, let him think. But don't you just sit around. Show him what he's losing. They sat at the cafe for another hour, and gradually Jade felt her anger return. A good, healthy anger that gave her the energy to act, not just sit at home and cry into a pillow. Chloe was right. She needed to shake things up, to remind herself and the world that she was still alive, still capable of being interesting and desirable. They parted ways at the cafe entrance. Chloe was heading to work, and Jade decided to walk home. The city on a Saturday morning was full of people, couples strolling arm in arm, families with children, lone runners in athletic gear. Everyone looked happy and content with life. Only Jade walked down the sidewalk with the feeling that the world had cracked in half. Her phone vibrated in her purse. Jade took it out, expecting to see a message from Marcus, but an unknown number was displayed on the screen. Jade, it's Tiffany. We need to talk. Jade stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, and a passerby nearly bumped into her, muttering something in annoyance. Tiffany. That woman had nerve. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. Should she answer or just block the number and forget about it? The Thistle and Bloom Cafe on Elm Street. In 1 hour. A second message came. Jade stood, staring at the screen, feeling two desires warring inside her. The first, to tell that woman to get lost, to show her she wasn't playing her games. The second, to meet her, look her in the eye, and say everything that had built up. Without witnesses, without Marcus between them. I'll be there, she wrote, and immediately regretted it. But what was sent couldn't be taken back. She spent the hour at home, changing into jeans and a simple white blouse. No battle makeup, no provocative outfits. She wasn't going to seduce. She was going to settle things. The children were in the kitchen with Ms. Vivian. Jade called out that she was leaving on an errand and rushed out without waiting for questions. The Thistle and Bloom Cafe was a small, cozy place with wooden tables and the smell of fresh baked goods. Tiffany was already sitting in the corner by the window, wearing dark sunglasses, although the sun was barely breaking through the clouds. Seeing Jade, she took off her glasses, revealing red eyes underneath. Was Tiffany crying? She was. It was so unexpected that Jade was momentarily confused. Thank you for coming. Tiffany pointed to the chair across from her. I wasn't sure you would agree. I wasn't sure either, Jade admitted honestly, sitting down. But curiosity won. What did you want to say? Tiffany was silent, twisting a napkin in her hands. A waitress approached, took their order, 2 Americanos, and walked away. The cafe was almost empty. Only an elderly couple sat against the opposite wall, quietly talking about their own things. "I wanted to apologize," Tiffany finally said, her voice shaking. "Apologize?" Jade couldn't hide the sarcasm. "For what exactly? For hunting my husband for 6 months? For the spectacle you put on at your birthday party last night?" "For all of it." Tiffany looked up, and there was such pain in her eyes that Jade involuntarily softened. I behaved horribly, I know. But when I saw Mark again, when I saw him the way I remembered him, kind, attentive, strong, I couldn't help myself. My marriage fell apart. I was alone, unhappy, and he was like a life raft." "He's married," Jade reminded her harshly. "He has a family, 2 kids." "I know," Tiffany nodded. "And I know how selfish, how awful that sounds, but feelings don't ask if you should feel them or not. They just exist." The waitress brought the coffee, and they were silent while she placed the cups down. Jade took hers, took a sip, hot, strong, burning her tongue. She needed that pain to stay focused, not to let herself be pitied. "And now what?" she asked. "Did you come to ask for forgiveness, or to announce that you're taking my husband?" "I came to say that I'm backing off." Tiffany looked her straight in the eye. "Last night, after you left, I thought a lot about what I was doing, about the person I'd become. And I realized I don't want to be the woman who destroys other people's families. I'm not that person. Or at least, I don't want to be." Jade felt something shift inside her. She had expected anything. New attacks, manipulation, tears. But not this. Not a surrender. "Are you serious?" she asked disbelievingly. "Absolutely." Tiffany took her phone out of her purse and showed the screen. There was a text message to Marcus. "Mark, I'm truly sorry about last night. I don't think we should see each other anymore. I'm leaving the city. I found a job somewhere else. Be happy." Sent half an hour ago. Jade stared at the screen, rereading the words, and couldn't believe it. It was that simple. Tiffany was backing down. The problem was solved. The marriage was saved. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you changing your mind?" "Because last night I saw the way Mark looked at you when you walked out." Tiffany put her phone away. "And I realized he loves you. Maybe not as passionately as before. Maybe he's tired, confused, looking for something new, but he loves you. And I was just nostalgia for him, an escape from reality. If we were together, sooner or later, he would still compare me to you, in his thoughts, in his regrets. And I don't want to be the perpetual runner-up." The words sounded sincere, and Jade suddenly realized that Tiffany truly was hurting. She wasn't putting on a show, not manipulating, just speaking the bitter, honest truth. "I don't know what to say," Jade admitted. "You don't need to say anything." Tiffany stood up, leaving money on the table. "I just wanted you to know. Marcus is free. Fight for him if you want, or let him go. But it's between you two now. I'm out." She walked out of the cafe, leaving Jade sitting with her cooling coffee and a whirlwind of thoughts in her head. Jade sat in the nearly empty cafe, looking out the window at the passers-by, trying to process what had just happened. Tiffany had backed down, just like that, without a fight, without drama, without trying to hold on to Marcus. This should have made her happy. It should have brought relief. Instead, a strange feeling of emptiness mixed with confusion grew inside her, because now there was no one to blame. Tiffany had left the stage, but the problems in the marriage remained. And if Marcus came back, and Jade felt he would, then what? They would just continue living as before, pretending nothing happened, until a new Tiffany appeared in a few years, or until he left for good. Jade took out her phone and texted Marcus, "I need to see you. Tonight, at the park by the lake where we first met. 7 o'clock. A reply came almost instantly. "I'll be there." She returned home for lunch. Ms. Vivian was making soup. The children were in the living room watching a cartoon on TV. A typical Saturday scene, serene and calm. Only inside Jade, everything was churning. "Noah, Skylar, time to eat," Ms. Vivian called, ladling soup into bowls. The children reluctantly pulled themselves away from the screen and took their seats at the table. Skylar immediately started telling a story about the cartoon, about princesses and magical castles. Noah was silent, staring into his bowl, that 11-year-old sullen silence that parents usually blamed on puberty. "Mom, when is Dad coming back?" he suddenly asked, without looking up. Jade froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth. "Soon, sweetie. He has work." "You're lying." Noah looked up, and there was such grown-up sadness in his eyes that Jade felt a pang of guilt. "You argued. I heard you crying last night." Ms. Vivian paused with the bread in her hand, looking at her grandson in surprise. Skylar stopped talking, switching her gaze from her brother to her mother. "Noah," Jade began cautiously, "grown-ups argue sometimes. It's normal." "It's not normal when Dad leaves." The boy pushed his bowl away. "Leo's parents argued like that, and then they got divorced. Are you two getting divorced too?" "No!" Skylar jumped up from her chair, her eyes filling with tears. "Mom, tell him no!" Jade stood up and hugged her daughter, feeling the small body tremble with sobs. Across the table, Noah watched, not crying, but with the same fear in his eyes, and next to them sat Ms. Vivian, her face stern and impenetrable. "I don't know," Jade said honestly, stroking Skylar's hair. "I honestly don't know what will happen. But I know for sure that your father and I love you very much, and whatever happens, that will never change." "But you love each other, right?" Skylar sobbed. That was the question Jade couldn't answer with certainty. Did she love Marcus? Yes, probably. By habit, by history, by their shared past. But that passionate, all-consuming love they had in the beginning? No, that love had died somewhere between the first pregnancy and the mortgage. "Of course we do, honey," she lied. "We're just a little tired. That happens to adults." Noah scoffed skeptically, but didn't argue. Lunch ended in a tense silence, broken only by Skylar's chewing and the clinking of spoons. Afterward, the children scattered to their rooms, and Ms. Vivian kept Jade in the kitchen. "What is really going on?" she asked, loading the dishwasher. Jade sat down on a chair, tiredly rubbing her temples. "Marcus is confused. He met an old acquaintance, felt energized, got caught up in the moment. He thinks things would be better with her. Tiffany made a scene last night, and today she refused to fight for him." "Fool," Ms. Vivian summarized curtly. "Men often act foolishly in their 40s. It's called a midlife crisis. They think they can regain their youth if they find a younger lover." "She's 38, Jade corrected mechanically. "Still a fool," Ms. Vivian repeated. "But you're no better." Jade looked up in surprise. "Me? You allowed yourself to turn into a gray mouse," Ms. Vivian said harshly, but without malice. "You stopped taking care of yourself, stopped being interesting. It's all been the children and the house. A man needs a woman, not a maid who doubles as the mother of his kids." The words were hurtful, but fair. Jade wanted to object, to defend herself, but she couldn't. "What should I do?" she asked quietly. "Remember who you are." Ms. Vivian closed the dishwasher and straightened up. "And if you decide to fight for your husband, fight for real. If you decide to let him go with your head held high. But don't sit in the posture of a victim. It's repulsive." Evening came quickly, as if time was deliberately rushing to the climax. Jade changed into a simple gray dress, put on a light jacket, and left the house, telling the children she was going to the store. Lying to them was getting harder. The park greeted her with the evening chill and the scent of freshly cut grass. The lake glittered in the rays of the setting sun. Couples walked the paths. Children ran with ice cream. Jade walked to a familiar bench, the same one where Marcus had first kissed her 15 years ago. He was already waiting, sitting and looking at the water, and only turned his head when Jade sat down next to him. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi." They were silent, listening to the rustling of the leaves, the lapping of the water at the shore, and the distant laughter of a child. Tiffany texted me, Marcus began. She said she's leaving. I know, Jade nodded. We met today. You met? He looked at her in surprise. Why? She wanted to apologize and explain why she's backing off. Marcus rubbed his face with his hands, as he always did when he was confused. I don't know what I feel, he admitted. I feel like I should be happy that the problem is solved, but instead, I'm empty. Because she was your escape from reality, Jade said. And now the escape is over, and you're left alone with what you were running from. With us. With yourself, she corrected him. With the fact that you're unhappy with your life, that you feel trapped. Marcus, I don't want to be your trap. He looked at her, and there was so much pain in his eyes that Jade almost regretted her words. You're not a trap, he said. You. Jade, I honestly don't know what's wrong with me. I love you. I love the kids, but I feel like I'm suffocating in this life. Then maybe we need to let each other go, Jade said, her heart pounding wildly. Give you the freedom you want so badly. Marcus was silent for a long time, looking at the lake. The sun had almost set, and the water was dark, opaque. I don't know if I want freedom, he finally said. Or maybe I'm just afraid I'm missing out on something important, that life is passing me by while I'm stuck in a routine. Life isn't passing you by. Jade took his hand. Life is routine. Making breakfast, taking the kids to school, kissing them goodnight. All of that is life, Marcus. Not adventures, not passion, but simple, ordinary days. And if you don't find happiness in that, the problem isn't with me or with Tiffany. The problem is with you. Marcus squeezed her hand in response, and Jade felt his fingers tremble. They sat on the bench, surrounded by the deepening twilight, and for the first time in years, they talked not about the children, not about the bills, not about domestic trivialities, but about themselves, about what had truly been going on between them all this time. When I met Tiffany, Marcus began, slowly choosing his words, I suddenly felt 20 again. Remember how I was then? Full of plans, dreaming of starting my own business, traveling, writing, and now, a manager in someone else's company, a 20-year mortgage. The only travel is a trip to the beach once a year. Do you regret marrying me? Jade asked directly. Do you regret that we had children? No, he shook his head. God, no. I just lost myself somewhere along the way. I stopped being Marcus and became only dad, husband, provider. Sometimes I look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. Jade understood. She understood that feeling better than he could have guessed, because she had gone through the exact same thing. When Noah was born, and then Skylar, she had dissolved into motherhood like sugar in hot tea. She stopped being Jade and became just mom, and only now, on the brink of her marriage collapsing, was she beginning to remember who she used to be. Do you know what the scary thing is? She said, looking at the dark surface of the lake. I lost myself too. I also don't know who I am without the role of wife and mother, and I'm also afraid that life is passing me by. But the difference between us is that I didn't look for salvation in someone else's arms. That's not fair. Marcus turned to her. I didn't sleep with Tiffany. I didn't even kiss her. But you wanted to. Jade looked him in the eye. You wanted to, Marcus. And in some ways that's worse, because physical cheating is a moment of weakness, but emotional cheating is a conscious choice. You chose to share with her what you should have been sharing with me. Marcus let go of her hand, stood up, and walked along the shore. The streetlights along the path flickered on one by one, enveloping the park in a soft yellow glow. Somewhere in the distance, a street musician played a sad melody on his guitar, one that suited the moment perfectly. What should we do? He asked, stopping and looking at Jade. I don't want to lose my family. I don't want the kids to grow up without a father, but I also don't want to pretend everything is fine when it's not. Then let's stop pretending. Jade stood up and walked over to him. Let's admit that our marriage is sick, that we're both unhappy, each in our own way, and try to start over." "How?" Hope, fragile and uncertain, sounded in his voice. "Honestly." Jade took his hands, looking into his eyes. "You tell me your fears, your dreams, what you're missing, and I'll tell you mine. And we'll try to find a way to be not just parents, but people. Separate people with our own interests and desires, and then maybe we'll find each other again. And if we don't, then we'll separate," Jade simply said. "But at least we'll do it honestly, not through cheating and lies, but like adults, for ourselves and for the children." Marcus was silent, processing her words. Jade saw his brain working, weighing, analyzing. He had always been so careful, so cautious, so afraid of making the wrong move. "Okay," he finally said, "let's try, but I don't promise it will work." "I don't promise either," Jade agreed, "but we have to try, at least for Noah and Skylar." They hugged awkwardly, stiffly, like strangers, not people who had lived together for 14 years, but in that embrace was a new honesty, one that freed them from the need to pretend. They returned home together. Marcus grabbed his bag from the car and walked into the apartment. The children rushed to greet him with shouts of joy. Skylar hung on his neck. Noah gave a reserved nod, but relief was evident in his eyes. Ms. Vivian peeked out from the kitchen, gave them an assessing look, and seemed satisfied with what she saw. "Daddy's staying?" Skylar whispered, not letting go of her father. "He's staying," Jade confirmed. "We're all staying together." The evening passed with normal domestic routines: dinner, a movie viewed as a family, putting the children to bed. Jade sat on the edge of Skylar's bed, stroking her daughter's hair until she fell asleep, and thought about the long, difficult road ahead. She and Marcus hadn't won each other back. They had only agreed to try to find each other again, and that was scarier than just continuing to live by inertia. Later that night, when the children were asleep and Ms. Vivian had gone home, Jade and Marcus sat in the kitchen with tea. A notebook lay between them, Jade's idea. To write down everything: desires, fears, dreams, hurts. It was impossible to start with a completely clean slate, but they could try to clear the clutter of the past. "I want to go back to music," Marcus said unexpectedly. "Remember, I used to play guitar and write songs?" "I remember," Jade smiled. "You dedicated one to me, terribly clumsy, but very touching. The guitar is still on the balcony." He chuckled. "It's covered in dust. I thought about throwing it out, but I couldn't bring myself to." "Don't throw it out." Jade placed her hand over his. "Get it out. Play. And I want to go back to painting. I used to paint, remember?" "You were talented," Marcus nodded. "Why did you stop?" "I ran out of time," Jade shrugged. "The kids, the house, the work, all of that ate up my time, but I want to take it back, even if it's just an hour a day." They talked late into the night, writing their wishes, big and small, in the notebook. Marcus wanted to learn to cook, go backpacking, and read War and Peace, which he'd been putting off for 20 years. Jade dreamed of dancing, of a trip to the ocean without the kids, and of her own watercolor exhibition someday in the future. And gradually, word by word, they began to rediscover each other. It turned out that beneath those 14 years of marriage, two strangers had been hiding, each with their own dreams they were afraid to voice aloud. "Do you think we'll make it?" Jade asked, when the clock showed 1:30 in the morning. "I don't know," Marcus answered honestly, "but I want to try, to truly try, not for the kids, not because we're supposed to, but for us." Jade nodded, feeling something fragile and timid unfurl inside her. Hope. Maybe their marriage truly had been on the brink. Maybe they really had lost each other somewhere between the bills and the parent-teacher meetings. But for the first time in years, they had started looking for a way back, not to what used to be, but to what could be, and that was something. "I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, Show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.